How are you doing? I'm all right. I don't know if I need to talk about something. I have to leave it.
All right, we are going to call to order the December 12th, 2024 meeting of the Lexington Planning Commission. And the first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any questions, comments, additions they would like to make? Or if not, then I think we need a motion.
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and opposed? And motion carries. So next is approval of the minutes from the November 14th, 2024 meeting. They seemed very accurate.
I have one tiny adjustment
Okay.
because I didn't leave that meeting early. I left the meeting before early, but I didn't leave that meeting early.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you.
All right, then I need a motion.
I move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and opposed? And motion carries. And next item is citizens' comments on matters that are not on the agenda. So if we have anybody here who would like to come up and talk to us about anything that is not on our agenda for tonight, we would welcome you to do so. And seeing as we don't have a rush to the podium, I will close citizens' comments and open up our new business section. So the first item on new business is an application by, CUP 2025-01, an application by VMI alumni agencies for approval of a conditional use permit to allow a portion of the building located at 45 South Main Street, tax map number 23-1-82, to be used as an educational facility, college/university. Arnie, can we have a staff report?
Indeed. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. We do have a request for a conditional use permit to allow the second floor of the building at 45 South Main Street, located in the C1 zoning district, to be used as administrative facilities associated with an educational facility, college, university. As you see the photograph there on page 1 of 45 South Main Street, if I'm not mistaken, the entrance will be on the right-hand door, not the main door to the bank, but the right-hand door provides access to a stairwell and I think an elevator, if I'm not mistaken. That leads you up to the second floor. On the second page of your staff report, you'll see the property outlined in that first location map. The VMI alumni agencies are requesting to temporarily move its offices and operations into the second floor of the Bank of the James building, while its permanent location on Letcher Avenue undergoes demolition and renovation. The swing office space is expected to be needed for no more than 36 months. The request is for the second floor only. The main level of the building will continue to be occupied by the Bank of the James. As we experienced with the previous request from another educational facility in the C1 zoning district, an educational facility, college, university is a conditional use. And we provided you on the bottom of page 7 the definition in that underlined portion. Again, this term includes academic buildings, administrative facilities. This is an administrative facility, and therefore it requires a conditional use in the C1 zoning district. On page 8 of your overall packet, you see all of the conditions of issuance. And I really want to change that at some point to your criteria for issuing a conditional use permit. So your criteria A, B, C, and D, as always, we ask that you utilize those for your decision-making, either for or against the request. In addition to item 3 there that says, as well as any other reasonable land use and zoning considerations that may be required by the nature of the proposed use. Staff did craft 2 conditions. So on the very bottom of page 8, the first condition, because we all know that construction projects always take a little bit longer than what we expect. So if there is an expectation of 36 months, we try to put in a little bit of cushion there. So the first, The first proposed condition is that only the second floor of the building may be utilized for administrative facilities related to the educational facility, college, university use. That is the request. The first floor will remain bank use. The second condition over on page 9, that this conditional use permit be issued for a period of 48 months and that one renewal of up to 12 additional months may be administratively approved by staff if requested by the applicant. Again, that's just a mechanism to provide a little bit of cushion in case the construction takes longer than is expected. Happy to answer any questions.
All right. Does anybody have any questions?
What is that space currently being used for?
If I'm not mistaken, a small amount of the upstairs space, in addition to the bathrooms that are upstairs, are used for bank, but the remainder of that, the last time I was in there, was not utilized for anything. It was just old office space unutilized.
Thank you.
I went over there the other day, went up the the stairway through the entrance from the bank. I just wanted to make sure I was looking at the right spot. And there's like a kitchen up there. The space, I'm okay. That's great. Yeah, thank you.
And then everything, once you get past that down the hallway,
Right.
I think it's all that goes all the way down the hallway.
Yeah, thank you.
And well, this is probably a question for the applicant, but is there going to be renovation up there?
There will have to be renovation to accommodate offices, yes.
And when would they occupy?
As soon as possible. I think is the request is we had to time out the public hearings as fast as we could so that they could get the approval and start getting the building permit for those renovations. So they are on a deadline.
And so if we went with this 48 months, would that include the time that they are doing the renovations? Okay.
Right. It would be from the date that the approval occurs from council. That's when the clock would start ticking on the approval for the 48 months and then the 12 months after that if needed.
Okay.
The intention is that all offices would return to VMI after that time period.
That is my understanding. Yes, there is a new facility being constructed for the alumni agency. So once that is finalized, finished, has a CO, it would move back.
Any other questions for Arnie?
I have two, which I've mentioned Arnie before. One is how many, and the applicant can tell us, is how many staff will be working there?
Mhm.
And then the second related question to that is, have they made any accommodations for parking? In regards to what the staff will need? So
Okay. So that sounds like questions for,
I think so.
Yeah,
Later.
okay.
Yeah.
All righty. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, we will take an applicant statement. And if you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Of course. Kevin Ryan, representing VMI Alumni Agencies.
And I'm Mead King, also representing the VMI Alumni Agencies.
Before getting into too many particulars, I did want to give a public compliment and appreciation to Arnie and Kate. They've provided tremendous service. This is a first for us. And our learning curve would have been a lot steeper if not for their kind support. Evidenced by the extension in there in terms of the timing in the event that there is some construction delay. So they've been wonderful, great representation on behalf of the city. We can define whatever else will be helpful. I think maybe just starting to answer those questions on a day-to-day basis, we would expect approximately 10 people in the office. Those will be largely representative of our senior leaders with some influx of maybe a small handful of folks coming in as needed, more irregular, but for shared workspace, and then also meeting needs and whatnot. Parking wise, we've walked it ourselves. The proximity to the public parking garage adjacent to the courthouse is ideal. It's attractive. I think it's better than what most of us have already right now in terms of getting into our current office situation. So we have already started to communicate that, and that would be our emphasis to our team, that public parking be utilized. So we wouldn't want to burden any of the on-street parking. To the extent we can avoid that would be ideal. A couple other things that I would share, just overall excitement from the folks were tangential to downtown as we currently sit, but being in the midst of it, embedded within, I think would be ideal for us just in terms of utilizing and benefiting more directly, more regularly from all the wonderful dining and the retail and other activities. And then furthermore, we have no issues whatsoever, complete agreement with the stipulations and conditions that have been put in that application. So barring any other questions or need is much more enjoyable to listen to. Anything else? from
Not
your
at
side?
all. Not at all. No, just reiterate that it is a temporary use for us. We're going to be displaced. And we would delight in having that office space for the period of time while our new offices are being constructed. As soon as we get the green light and occupancy permit back on post, we would vacate the second floor of the Bank of the James and head back to post. Kicking and screaming maybe after joy and glow bowls and that's
Yeah.
Indeed. Does anybody have any questions?
No.
No? All right.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for your consideration.
All right. And now we will open it for public comment. If there are any members of the public here who would like to comment on this matter on the agenda. And we'll close that right on up. And now we are in the formal commission discussion and decision. Does anybody have any concerns, comments? It seems like a pretty straightforward need, a short-term need, relatively short-term need. And the conditions seem appropriate. So I guess we're waiting for a motion.
I move to approve. CUP 2025-01 as presented.
Is that,
It's there. It
Okay,
should
yeah.
be there. Yeah, there it is.
To allow a portion of the Bank of the James to be used for administrative facilities related to the educational facility with the two conditions recommended by staff.
Second.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Congratulations. I hope the process goes quickly for you and that you enjoy the restaurants, et cetera.
My class. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to our very favorite discussion topic, which is zoning ordinance amendment 2024-03, cottage housing. So, Arnie, would you like to enlighten us as to what our intent is for the evening?
To get through as much of this as we can. Hopefully we can get through the whole thing, but I've got to admit, I do have quite a number of small items, just wordsmithing here and there. So hopefully as much as we can, if not, we can pick it up at the next meeting.
Okay.
Perhaps two observations and then a couple of comments from our fire and building folks. So one observation is that occurred to me, site plan will be required for these. So they will be coming in for a conditional use in either one of the four zoning districts. And the thing that follows conditional use in the approval process is site plan. And the reason it perhaps hasn't occurred to me is site plans are required for all development, but there's an exception for one family and two family developments. You could say these are one family developments, but it's going to be built as a pod or as that's more than two. So it's going to be my interpretation, unless we put something specifically in this code that exempts them from site plan requirement. The good thing is conditional use permits is going to be requiring them to put so much information on the plan anyway, that they will already have a good bit of information in hand when they do site plans. Site plans a little bit further and is still necessary in my opinion, because then they put in where the water lines are coming from, where the sewer lines are coming from. And that's going to be a little bit more complicated because we're going to be in a condominium style development. And it's going to be some required coordination with Public Works on where the meters are and how all that gets laid out. So just wanted to bring that to your attention that my interpretation is site plan will still be required, and I think it's also valuable.
Do
Can
we
I
need
ask a-
any, like, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just gonna say, do we need any language or you're just gonna interpret what we already have existing? Okay.
Site plan in a different section of the code says site plan is required. You cannot get a building permit without site plan, except there is an exception, specific exemption for 1 and 2 family developments. And that's not what this is.
Yeah.
This is not one house on one lot. This is 4 to 12 on potential on one lot.
Yeah.
And a
That
one
gets-
family, 2 family, that would be a single family or a duplex.
Correct.
And so the one family, the site requirement that exempts the one family or 2 family house is per lot as opposed to per house.
I think it just says per 1 family or 2 family development. But again, my interpretation of that, normally you have a house on one lot, you're building only one dwelling unit unless you're doing an accessory dwelling unit. But that's what you are allowed on, permitted on a lot. This is different in the sense that we're not
Yeah.
putting one house on one
Yeah.
lot. So therefore my interpretation is going to be automatically, unless you want to specifically say that this is exempted, and I don't think that's valuable.
No,
I think we need the
I
protection
don't.
of this going through site plan.
No, I don't think so. I'm just wondering whether we want to specifically say this does
Oh, in that section.
in that section, just, no, in this, and just say a site plan will be required.
Okay, well, let's
It's
keep
just a
that,
sentence.
keep that in as we're going through either intent section, because I have something in the intent that might actually work there. So if there are no more additional questions for site plan, and the other observation is that we have a lot of requests for a home occupation permits. And you all don't see those, so they just, if they meet the home occupation standards, and there are 7 or 8 standards in the home occupation section for residential dwellings. If it's less than, if the home occupation utilizes less than 25% of the floor area of the main building, and then there are other standards. And I just wanted to point out that we already have in the cottage housing that you cannot use these as short-term rentals. And we would continue to utilize these. I think it's fine actually to continue to utilize them for home occupations, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We are getting into a smaller and smaller unit potentially. And do we want to allow or not allow home occupation permits? And I can read those standards to you if that's helpful, but they really do limit the use of the residential portion of the building. You can't have outdoor storage of stuff that we've talked about. You cannot create any noise, vibration, heat, glare, dust, odor, or smoke discernible at the property lines, which is always my favorite one to read to people. So there are some standards in there for home occupation. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, because we do have 1 or 2 a week that we get requested, that
Wow.
people will go in for a business license. We get the zoning approval form, and most of those end up being for home occupations. Just to bring that to your attention. If nothing there, handed this over to Trent Roberts, our fire marshal, and also to our building official, Steve Pauk. Trent had some general comments. One that I thought was a little bit interesting. There's a lot of language concerning trees and such. I am requesting that existing / installed landscaping trees not be positioned as to promote fire spread from one structure to another. Don't really know how we do that. We'll review. There's not really much that we have in the tree / landscaping section anyway. And I'm thinking I'm going to recommend some shalls go to should, because we really don't have the support of a tree ordinance per se that impacts residential. So I just thought that was, normally we're promoting trees, but he's taking a look at it from a life safety point and thinking about fire spread, which never occurred to me, quite honestly. Steve had a number of questions. Some of it will be more site plan related, sort of, will natural gas be allowed? Is propane going to be allowed? What are the requirements for water meters and sewer laterals, which I hadn't thought of, but we have standards for that in Public Works. And to be quite honest, they'll figure that out.
Yeah.
So yes, it's going to be a little bit more complicated because there may be a master meter that feeds, but there are mechanisms to figure that out. Is there a central garbage can corral? And I think there will be in most of these cases, if not all of them, because there's a community aspect And there's really no way for the Public Works to go and grab the trash at each door because it's not going to be the standard door. They're not going to go down the community open space and pick up all the trash. So the trash will most likely be with the parking over on the side somewhere. Seems to make sense to me.
Does that fall under, I have a question about that actually, and is that part of utility, what would be considered utility equipment?
It's not really utilities, but we can figure out if we need to make an extra statement about trash corrals, either in the parking section or in utilities if we craft something there.
And maybe also mailboxes, or are we saying
Oh, I
sticker
hadn't even-
boxes or,
I hadn't even thought about mailboxes, honestly.
but
But
that might
yeah,
also be something.
an additional item, correct? And then one thing that did create a little bit more of a question for me from Steve is, are electrical services going to be required to be underground? I don't think we have that specifically. I think there's a statement that should be. So I've crafted one thing to potentially add the requirement for undergrounding of utility services. And we'll get to that as we go through. So those are the only observations, and happy to just start right in on the intent section.
Yep.
Yep.
I have a quick question. It's probably for Kate. So where things are in red or underlined or highlighted, tell me what that's just copied.
At some point during a discussion, someone said, oh, let's go back to that.
Okay.
Or, oh,
Okay, so this is
some of them I can.
calling attention to.
Some of them I.
Okay.
We're hoping that you can help us out with some of those too, because we
right.
can't remember all of them, not without going through the detailed minutes from all the meetings. And we've had quite a number. Perhaps just to start on page 15, again, you've seen this a number of times, nothing's changed here, but in sort of our going through the zoning ordinance, the first thing that we come to that would include cottage housing development as an item would be the use matrix. So the use matrix is written in such a way that it's going to add cottage housing development as a residential use type. And then it's listed as a conditional use in the R1, R2, RM, and RLC zoning district. Nothing's changed there. That's the way it's been for a bit. Going over to the next page, we do have exterior lighting and heating P highlighted because we made some changes at the last meeting, and we just want to make sure that we're sort of coordinating, and I think we can consolidate some of that. So that's just one example of adding something last time and then highlighting it so we knew that to go back and make sure that it didn't conflict with something else. Over on 17, just starting in on the purpose statement, purpose and intent. I've got a number of requested or suggested changes, and you all might as well. Going down to the first, second, third sentence, these design standards are intended to ensure that cottage housing developments include pedestrian amenities and take advantage of existing natural features on the site, including topography and vegetation. My recommendation is, because I don't really think we are specifically requiring amenities or to take advantage of existing natural features on the site, including topography and vegetation. I don't think that's anywhere in there. So recommendation would be to strike the second half of that sentence after the and, or with the and after. And then furthermore, the next sentence, the cottage housing development design standards are intended to maintain traditional cottage amenities and proportions and ensure that cottage housing developments contribute to the overall community character. So my thought was to grab that first part of the sentence that we just amended. These design standards are intended to ensure cottage housing developments include pedestrian amenities. So the pedestrian amenities being an important part. So maybe we can fold that into the next sentence and do away completely with that third sentence that we're talking about. So therefore, if we get away with that third sentence, then the next sentence would then be the cottage housing development design standards are intended to ensure the inclusion of pedestrian amenities, comma, maintain traditional cottage amenities in proportions, comma, and ensure that cottage housing developments contribute to the overall community character. Did I clean it up a little bit?
It's nice.
Okay.
Now we did, though, there is a section about leaving trees.
But
Not a lot. Though.
Yeah.
They're small.
so That's up to you if you want to keep it the way it is here, but I don't think we had an emphasis necessarily.
Yes, I would certainly agree with there's not being an emphasis since, yeah. Okay,
If everybody's okay with that.
Yeah.
Anything else from anybody else? I'm sorry if I'm driving
you're-
too much.
I think you're good.
All right, the sentence in red, I would recommend to strike because they had alternative designs that meet the objective of the design standards may be reviewed through the conditional use permit. Well, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we're not
Yeah.
going to have an alternative design
That's right.
process because ours are going to at least start and maybe always be conditional uses.
Yeah.
And then that next sentence following the sentence in red, cottage housing may allow higher residential density. Actually, it is going to allow. So how about that changes to cottage housing allows higher residential density than is permitted in the underlying zoning district?
Yes.
Yep.
That's great.
Can I ask you about that sentence before? I actually kind of liked it, but
Oh, yeah?
not as far as I read that as not an alternative design process, but if they had other design
Oh.
standards that we could make accommodation
Okay.
through the CUP process. And I actually liked that if for
Okay,
some
yeah,
reason
sorry,
the
I read that
characters-
wrong. I
Okay.
was still stuck with that alternative design process,
Yeah.
but you're right. It does say just alternative designs that meet the objectives may be reviewed through the, yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I think
okay,
you're right.
I actually liked that. I thought it was
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of a safety net if we missed something.
Or if somebody had an unusual,
Right. piece of
something
property.
didn't
Yeah.
exactly fit, but
Right.
Mm.
But it's, and we can keep it, but it's still confusing to say can be reviewed through the conditional use permit process, which seems to imply that this isn't a CUP.
Yeah, like through this
Right.
process. or-
Right. Yeah, right.
Do you just shorten it to alternative designs that meet the objectives of the design standards may be considered?
Mm-hmm.
End of sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. May be considered.
Because everything is going to be a CUP, so maybe the rest of that's just not,
It's sort of nice
may
to
be
have that
considered
to accomplish.
to
part.
accomplish the objectives, yeah. I think you
Yes.
do pick up the rest of that.
Okay.
Maybe,
Be considered.
so it reads alternative designs that meet the objectives of the design standards may be reviewed to accomplish the,
Maybe
sorry, I
considered.
think I missed something.
Nope. Considered to accomplish the objectives of this article.
Yeah.
May be reviewed to accomplish the objectives of this article.
Reviewed or considered.
So there are two
Considered.
objectives, alternative designs that meet the objectives of the design standards may be reviewed to accomplish.
Yeah, that's confusing.
I don't think it quite works with,
Yeah.
They can be considered.
Got objectives in both.
Yeah,
I
could say
think that
goals.
the review through the CUP process is the part that is feeding the to accomplish the objectives.
Just
So
say-
how would that work? If somebody came in with an alternative design, how would they just come to you and then it would come to us?
because you have some shalls, you have some shoulds, let's say parking, let's say, we have 3 parking standards, or we have this recommendation, this is a first preference, and this is second and third. Let's say they have a weird parcel and they don't really meet A, B, and C, and they come in with C2, some other sort of variation, but you have the latitude in the conditional use permit, it's discretionary. And as long as it generally meets the criteria for conditional use permits, because we didn't come up with specific criteria for this conditional use permits for cottage housing development. So you have a lot of leeway in those 4 or actually 5 criteria. So you can just say if it's an alternative design, it may be considered as long as it generally meets the criteria laid out in this article.
I sort of feel like we might be, I mean, so it sounds like what we could then be saying is that, well, if you don't like what we've written, come to us with anything as long as it fits the objectives of the design standards.
Mhm.
That's where you use your good judgment and the criteria in front of you to say no if needed, or yes, that's just a minor change and it's needed for this particular parcel.
What about alternative designs may be considered to determine whether they accomplish the objectives of this article?
That's good.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
That's good.
That works. Thank you.
Yeah. Very good.
Did that answer sort of what happens with alternative designs or?
It does, because I think that we want to make sure, I don't know, I just feel like it's a little bit of a too much of an open door. It's like, come on in and for, throw this away. So,
I think when somebody reads this, they're gonna have to generally follow this, but they're
Mhm.
gonna be parcels that one way or another, I
Sure.
can't give you a great example because of the access, because that they cannot meet something or some
Right.
things. And then you're just gonna have to use your good judgment as the gatekeepers for this and
Yeah.
say, in your recommendation, it does or it doesn't meet.
Mhm.
thank you.
That's all I had for that first paragraph. Anybody else have anything up in there?
All right. Move along.
And item number 4, to encourage site design that maximizes the preservation of existing large trees in order to provide habitat for wildlife. I'm not sure that we are encouraging them and maximizing the preservation of existing large trees.
Well, when we talked about it, it was that we agreed that a lot of times they had already handled the tree situation by the
Right.
time they came to the CUP process, but
So do we want to jettison it or still maybe keep it and soften it a little bit? Is there any value to that?
So, well,
What's
so
the
the
object?
purpose, the purpose of this the purposes are to encourage site design which maximizes the preservation of existing large trees. Well, we don't really talk about habitat biodiversity or, yeah. John, did you have a comment there?
It'd be nice to keep,
Yeah,
is my overall comment. Especially in the purpose and intent section.
Well, we have it in the first sentence of the tree conservation section. Cottage housing development shall be designed to incorporate existing trees to the extent possible.
Yeah.
So I don't really see a problem with keeping it, maybe taking out maximizes a bit.
so
Maybe take
So
out maximizes.
perhaps, so I'm looking at the tree conservation section, which is on page 22 of the overall packet. Cottage housing developments. I just think that I am in favor of keeping it. However, I think that they should talk to each other a little bit more than they do. And so I guess I wonder if maybe what we need to do is just add a little bit of, maybe it's about promoting planting native trees instead of, yet another invasive, whatever it is in the tree conservation section. And maybe it's not tree conservation, maybe it is, which is to say not just conserving means that it's already there. Right. So maybe it's actually trees and landscaping, or trees and maybe it's not, trees and plants.
Vegetation,
I'm sorry.
vegetation.
Sure. Trees and vegetation, or just vegetation. And then incorporating existing trees to the extent possible, but then saying new trees and maybe other vegetation, shrubs, with some, encouraging people to plant natives so that they're encouraging wildlife. And
I think even if you just say to encourage the site design with the preservation of existing trees, or I don't have a problem with leaving it and not going into a whole lot of detail in the other, but I don't like maximizes in there.
So to encourage site design with the preservation of existing trees.
With or for, yeah.
4. To encourage site design for the preservation of existing large trees. Well, that certainly addresses the issue in this section A. I would say we might want to look at section L. The one on 22, the tree conservation, and potentially call it vegetation. Trees and vegetation. I've made a note.
Yeah.
Because I know on some land I had locust trees and I would not want to keep those for anything because they were falling apart. There's certain trees you don't want to keep, but existing trees, not all existing vegetation is good vegetation.
It is true. It is true. And I think, if it was a tree of paradise or tree of heaven, whatever those things are called, you wouldn't want to keep it. So maybe it's about encouraging native trees, native species of trees, existing native species of large trees or large native species, tree species, large native.
I don't know.
Tree
Are locust
species.
trees native? Because I would not want to keep those. The thorns are locust trees native. I think that's what I had. They were all thorny and
Like the sweet gum,
they're great firewood. So they're
like
good
the
to cut down.
gumball ones
Oh
that
my
fall.
God.
Is that what you're
I don't
talking
think
about?
those-
The sweet
they're not
gumball
native, are they?
are thorny.
Ouch. So for but we're not requiring it.
Yeah, it's an encourage.
It's encouraging, encourage
encourage.
site design for the preservation of existing large native tree species.
That would be a first.
Just an idea.
So is everybody okay with that language?
One more time, one more
What
time.
time, yeah.
Do you want me to read it?
Please.
To encourage site design for the preservation of existing large native tree species in order to provide, etc.
Very good.
Sounds good.
Okay, everything's good there. Number 6 is underlined to provide community amenities for the residents of the development such as common open space. Since we're not really requiring that, can we maybe change to provide to encourage community amenities for the residents of the development such as common open space? Well, actually, common open space
It
is
is
something that's
Yeah,
provided.
common open
You mean
space.
the
Community, I
buildings,
was
right?
thinking the
Yeah.
community buildings and the
Yeah.
community other things, but
Just strike that. Just strike community buildings and then you can.
I thought 5 and 6 were basically saying the same thing, except for 5 had while reducing the dominance of vehicles on the site. I almost thought keep 6 and throw that part about cars at the end of it and get rid of 5.
okay, so that's keep 6 and then add to the end of that while reducing dominance of vehicles on the site.
I don't
Because it
know.
just says such as, it doesn't say we're requiring community
Okay,
buildings.
okay.
I guess that was my point, not requiring the open space because clearly we are. So
Yeah,
just,
right. Oh, I see
we're
what
not
you're saying.
requiring
Yeah.
the community buildings, whatever they may be.
I like number 5 better than I like number 6.
Yeah, then maybe just leave that and then don't do 6. I didn't really, I thought they were pretty much the same thing.
Right.
Except the other, it said
Right.
about the community buildings mentioned.
I agree.
Is that a vote or a recommendation to just to jettison 6?
Oh, well, okay, so hang on. The connectivity, I would say, is the important part of 6 to me, to the way I'm looking. So we want to make sure that we're encouraging pathways, for example, or access for example, we've got the green infrastructure plan.
Yeah. What
Well-
if that and connectivity to surrounding areas was just added after site in 5?
Well, it's already in 5. It
Oh,
says
it-
and
oh.
connection to environment by orienting cottages around accessible, usable.
Yeah.
common open
Well,
space.
but connection to the environment is not the same as connectivity to surrounding areas. So,
To the rest of the neighborhood.
right,
Yeah.
to the rest of the neighborhood, maybe to the grocery store, maybe to the park. Now, I'm not entirely clear on how we are providing connectivity to the surrounding areas. That's
Right.
Yeah, like,
maybe different.
but it could say like while maintaining connectivity to surrounding areas that provides for,
How about encouraging connectivity to surrounding areas? Because, yeah,
So you want to make it a number 6 that just begins to encourage
yeah, to encourage connectivity to
connectivity to
surrounding
the surrounding
areas.
areas, because one is more internal and then one
Yep.
is the connection to the
Oh, okay.
surrounding
Yep, I like
neighborhoods.
that.
so they stay separate points, but
Yeah.
they're
Yep.
obviously.
So the number 6 would then be to encourage connectivity to surrounding areas.
Yeah.
That
Provides from,
encourages neighborhood interactions, security and sense of community.
I'd avoid the double.
I don't think that it
encourage.
provides.
Yeah. But the encourage, we want to,
To
Like the same for
encourage,
one
yep,
does.
yep. To encourage connectivity to surrounding areas,
that enables neighborhood
that
interaction.
enable.
And then 4 would drop, so that enables neighborhood interaction, security, and a sense of community.
Okay,
Kate,
so
did you-
does that mean 5 stays as is
Yes,
and 6 gets changed
yes.
to
Encourage connectivity to surrounding areas. That.
And provides.
that
and provides.
enables?
That
and-
enables neighborhood interaction, security, and a sense of community.
That sounds nice, but our only requirement is that we continue sidewalks that are existing. So I don't really know that we're.
Well, except
I-
there's the stuff about like the direction the houses are facing, right? And
Yeah,
not wanting
open space.
to build a fortress.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and also this is the purpose and intent, right? So we want people when they're building these, when they're planning and then building these units to be thinking that. Yeah, this part of the intent is that we're connecting, that we're not just having this pod of people be like in and of themselves, but we're encouraging community development.
Yeah.
Not in that way, but community.
Mhm.
Everyone generally okay with what was just read?
One more time. Let's look at it one more.
To encourage connectivity to surrounding areas that enables neighborhood interaction, security, and a sense of community. That work?
Mhm.
And enables, you said, instead of that provides.
That enables.
Oh, that enables.
To encourage connectivity to surrounding areas that enables neighborhood interaction, community, security, and a sense of community.
Not to open a nest here, but one possibility is to move, just thinking of the order, move 7 up to, because it's really about internal.
Mm,
Yeah.
And it's a design issue, so move
Yep.
that up a bit to, I mean, it's really an intent that we want to encourage community interaction through usable front porches.
Yeah.
So it could go between 3 and 4. It could
That's what I
become the
think.
new 4.
I agree.
Good.
Yeah.
So it's the new 4.
I also had a very picky one on 2, actually, if we,
Mhm.
so where it says compatible with other forms of low density residential uses, that seems to me to imply that the cottage housing is a low density. And I think what we mean is that it will be compatible with other existing uses that are lower density than this. So what if it just said other forms of comma, lower density, comma, residential uses? I know it's a super picky, like typical.
What if we just took out that are so other forms? So what if we
Yeah.
just made it to encourage development of attractive infill residential communities that are compatible with low density residential uses?
Yeah. Or even just like existing residential uses.
System.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that are compatible with existing residential uses.
That's
Existing,
Low
but
density.
surrounding, right?
Yeah.
Maybe surrounding residential uses.
Yeah.
What was function?
Yeah, with surrounding residential uses is good. I
In some ways it's more interactive.
Could take out low density and put surrounding.
think so.
Yep.
I know it's a very picky little point.
It's not. It's words have meaning, as you know. So to encourage development of attractive infill residential communities that are compatible with surrounding residential uses.
Existing surrounding. Existing surrounding.
I don't know. that
I
you
don't
need
know.
Existing.
Yeah, I'm not sure you
Surrounding
need the
is
existing.
existing.
Yeah.
Yes, if it's already there, then if it is surrounding this piece of land, it is. Sorry, yeah.
And I've got one more at the end, potentially just with the idea of the undergrounding of utilities that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So a new 8 or whatever the number ends up being, to enhance the aesthetic appeal of new cottage housing development by requiring the undergrounding of all utilities.
Great.
Yay.
It could be somewhere else later on, but
Yeah.
we just want to keep it here for now and
Yes.
then.
For sure.
All right, page 2. I have nothing here other than I've highlighted a couple of the references which are coming from other codes. So we just have to infill our correct reference sections.
Anybody else have anything on page 18 or 6 of 15?
You know, the very, very bottom, which is the note. In number 2, we have maybe two different things. And I think the reason we had this note is from a previous discussion. So in number 2, we're talking about all residential uses count towards the maximum density. The second sentence may be counted as a cottage unit if it's if the property is developed subject to provisions. And the last sentence is the one that maybe doesn't fit here. New accessory dwelling units are not permitted in cottage housing developments. So the question was, do we keep it there or do we put that somewhere else? And my thought was maybe to put it to Q. We're talking about ownership. It's not great there, but it may fit where we're talking about, and that's on page 26 overall of your packet.
I thought it read okay where it was.
Yeah.
Would at least, yeah.
And your
Does it-
title there says accessory to family dwelling units, accessory, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't hurt to have it down there.
Okay. If you're
New
fine with it, that was
Yeah.
just a note from earlier. We can certainly leave it. It's easier than moving it.
Does it want to have a third, just be number 3?
Yeah. Everybody okay with that? That
Yeah.
last sentence is just the new number 3.
That's good.
That's fine.
All righty. That's
All right, so wait a minute, but now an existing accessory dwelling unit may be counted as a cottage unit. Okay. But new ones are not. Yeah, okay.
we just didn't want somebody to
Actually, I want,
quadruple up on density.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're right.
I wonder if both of the things that, both of the sentences that have to do with the ADUs should be in the same number. So so number 2, all residential units in a cottage housing development count toward the maximum permitted density period. Next item. An existing accessory dwelling unit may be counted, and then no new ones are not permitted.
I would leave it all in one. I think I'd leave it in all one.
I think pulling out the ADU items just makes it easier for somebody who's reading through it. To say, oh, this is about ADUs as opposed to maximum permitted density.
Well, but it is going to count towards your, if it's allowed, it's going to count towards your maximum permitted density.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
so I
Oh,
would
no,
leave it
no,
all
you're right.
together.
Okay. Yep. So then just leave it as number 3 as the new accessory dwelling units are not permitted.
I would leave that number 2. I just leave it as it was presented because it's all related. It is a little different saying, but you can't build new ones, but I think it's related to that sentence before it.
I am okay with it either way.
Yeah, I agree.
Same here.
Either way.
Either way. It's easier to leave it than to change it.
Yeah.
We'll
I can
leave it.
believe It's, they follow each other.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'd leave it.
Okay, and then we'll get rid of the note.
I mean, what you're saying is if you come in and there's and I think this is going to be more the rare occasion. That we're
Yes. Agreed.
talking to here, so.
So they're going to be reading it more carefully. Building height? Nothing? Anybody?
Nice
All right,
and
we're
simple.
good. Variations in building design.
Does anybody have anything in the first few?
So you're going to get rid of things that are underlined, like the letter A or the word A article. In the first sentence,
Okay.
under objective, provide a variety. There's,
Sorry, I don't know.
I'm on variations in building design under number 1, the first line, objective cottage housing development. Structures shall provide a variety, but the A is underlined. Is that going to go away? It's underlined up.
No,
The
you're saying
underline, she wants the underline to go away.
the underline, not the.
Oh, yeah.
Just the underline. Okay. That's the only thing I have in that paragraph, but I do have some questions in this page. Do you have anything on this page?
Not until D.
Not until
D.
D is in dog. So my, let's see. There's also an underline in number A or 1A. The last line, there's an underline between both and of that needs to go away, but also we've got in number 1, changes in exterior material and paint color, and then also E, variations in materials and colors or colors between adjacent cottages is required. And so I just was wondering if we're requiring too much variation. We're going to have variations within each building and then variations between the buildings that are adjacent to one another. And I just wanted to float the question of whether we could end up having a little bit too much. Thank you for coming.
I think, I don't know, I sort of thought they were saying 2 different things. One is for all of them, we want some kind of material change or modulation. We don't want to see just little rectangular buildings.
Right?
And then down below is just emphasizing that we don't want to see 2 of the same houses right next to each other.
So I wonder if it might be helpful for E to be a variation in design rather than materials or color. Some variation in design. Because if you have exactly the same, like, let's say that they're right next to, I think that is allowed, right? You can have them be the same design right next to each other. Is that?
I think that's how I was promoting, but I'm not sure I won.
Wait, I think what you're saying, I think is fine, because we talked about like Weatherburn has
Yeah.
pretty similar, but they'll have just slight differences
Right.
in the facades that make it look different.
Or a
right.
paint
So I
color
think
change or
Your
something.
suggestion of using design is fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
I agree.
just,
Is it overcomplicated if it's variations in design that may include colors and materials between adjacent cottages is required, or just leave it alone or just leave it as variations in design between adjacent cottages is required?
I think just variations in design, because I worry, I wouldn't want it to just be like you've got the same thing, but you've got within the same house design, you could choose, a builder could choose to do changes in material and paint color on each house. And then they would have to be different between the two houses. And so you've got a lot of changes there that could create a visual cacophony.
I like variation in design.
Okay.
Point of interpretation, because so if we just said variation in design and didn't say something like which could include materials, colors, or structural features, will people assume that variation in design just means the latter? Like,
The architectural design. Yeah,
architectural
exactly.
fe-
That's what I was wondering too, when you said that, because they think you have to have a whole different floor
Right.
plan or architectural design.
I think it's just sort of the design would be, yeah, instead of having the front door here, you have it on the other side, or, there's just something different about it.
Yeah, I'm guessing anyone who's doing this will kind of go towards that. They'll ask for what they want, and that sentence will end up being for planning commission just an opportunity to say, you need a little more variation.
Right.
Okay, that's fine.
I don't think it's going to change their actual
Yeah,
design.
I don't think so either.
So just to be clear, they're not going to look at that phrasing and say, oh, they want every one of these to have a completely different architectural plan. That's going to be too expensive. I'm out.
Yeah.
And like never come.
Can be confused like that myself, but
How do you take it?
I said, I think to John's point, it could be confused that way, that it would potentially be read that you need a whole different architectural design. Like a different look to the house, not necessarily just materials or color, but like a different architectural design.
I'm guessing most people, most builders will not. I think if they go into enough subdivisions doing
Okay.
4 floor plans, pretty close, but just change the facade a little.
Right, because people like that.
And if they do, if they do interpret it more strictly, like you're saying, we've always got that sentence at the beginning that I like.
And
that
Arnie
says,
can clarify, right?
we may change, we
true.
may accept alternative designs.
Right.
It's true. And I'm persuaded I won't persist any further other than just to say the parenthetical is extremely easy and costless for us to introduce.
Yeah, I don't have a problem putting it on.
But I'll stop.
So, but if we leave in materials or colors, then you have this exact same, there's no change.
No, what I'm proposing is that it could say in parentheses, such as.
I like such as that's exactly what I was.
Materials,
But if-
colors,
but if
etc.
But if materials and colors are part of the design change that's that is acceptable, then you have exactly the situation.
Oh, I see. So okay. I thought you were saying that we wouldn't want them to feel like they're boxed into the difficult design problem of having to have within wall variation in color and material, and then also cross. So you were trying to give them more options for what they could vary from cottage to cottage, but you actually want to make sure that you don't want variation in material or color to be sufficient.
Yeah.
I see.
Well, so here's the thing. If they changed building modulation, like if they take A1A2 and do building modulation changes with a depth of at least 1 foot, then you could change the color and the color and materials, and it would work if there were differences between the building in building modulation. But if the only things that they're choosing are changes in exterior material and paint color, then you've got just the same building with a whole bunch of different changes in material and color,
Mhm.
which together might look a little bit
I understand.
over the top for the neighbors to look at all of the time. So
Talked about this before, you looked at the Third Street cottages.
Yeah.
Right.
Which have identical cottages. with
Yeah.
Different colors.
Right.
And we liked that.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we did? We decided that was okay.
Right.
I thought.
Exactly.
but are they different? Are they changes in material and paint color within each building and next door to each other?
I think
It's the same
It's actually
design,
floor
but just
plan.
different color. Yeah.
So this is material and paint color. So this is just paint color. This is just one choice, and it does look very nice. But this is requiring either changes in exterior material and paint color. So going from lap siding that's painted red to brick or stone. And then next door, you've got brick and I don't know, blue. So you've got you could have just all kinds of crazy color combinations that might not be that great.
Subject to review though.
Mhm.
He has to bring it to us first.
Well,
Like-
not so much color, but they have an HOA. I mean, most of the time the HOA will pick a color palette and they will have to stick to that, choose from within that. And that doesn't come up to us. That is not, worrying about
Right.
clashing colors is not our job. That's their HOA.
I'm not worrying about the colors.
Yeah.
I'm just worrying about we're saying materials and colors twice. We're having two places where we allow them to, or require them to make changes in materials and colors
that
within
might-
buildings.
That's another question is required, rather strong. And but going back to the point, variation, you could just say variation in design materials or colors between adjacent cottages is required or is encouraged to create distinct development within the, something to that effect. But where's the second one, Shannon, that you're
It's
saying?
it's in A1. Maybe, okay, so here, how about this? This is a very simple change that might answer my concern. In A1, changes in exterior material or paint color. Yeah, I think that might resolve my concern. Okay.
Okay.
And then E still is variation in design between adjacent cottages required to create.
So that could then be variations in design, materials, or colors.
Yeah. It's good.
Then you've got all three.
Right.
So then you've got.
Okay.
And is it required?
I would say required,
Recommended.
yeah. And E would be required.
Everybody good with that?
Mhm.
Sorry for taking so long over the
That's all right.
change of a word.
Good catch.
It's important. Yeah.
And then the last thing I have on this page is in G. I think the word staggering should be staggered, but
Yeah.
also that's not a clear requirement because it's just examples of strategies.
Yeah.
So I wonder where that should actually go. Maybe as a sentence that's up in the objective, in the first part of the objective. So it could go right before the following building design requirements must be met. But also, we don't actually talk much about privacy. So maybe it might need a little bit of a intro. Or, we say, that the building design requirements include, something about privacy.
Mm.
We're giving examples of strategies that support privacy without making it clear that privacy is something that we're encouraging. Does anybody have a thought on whether it should be a requirement or whether it should go up in the top paragraph?
I like your idea of moving it to the top, maybe before the main entries of some cottages sentence,
Okay,
because it seems to relate to what we're talking about, the way the cottages are facing their facade and the windows and the orientation and everything. You could,
how about if we made the sentence read cottage orientations, window locations, landscaping, and staggered cottages. Oh, wait, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Support privacy. I think our examples of is not needed.
Yeah, just take out that and we keep strategies in or strategies that support privacy.
So, right, so should be used as strategies that support privacy. That's so cottage orientations, window locations, landscaping, and staggered locations maybe should be used to support privacy or encourage or yeah. Makes sense?
So are you keeping it as you want to keep it as a G or move it up
I
now? Because we added should with your should.
right. Yeah. I think it could be left there if we change it to so that it is an actual requirement. And this is certainly addressed in further sections of the ordinance.
Are we then requiring staggered cottages in all?
How about cottage orientations, window locations, landscaping, and staggered locations are. How about are examples of strategies that should be used to support privacy? No.
Okay.
How about design, cottage development, overall design should support privacy. And then
Leave that sentence as is.
all right,
It's-
so
Yeah, I don't want to like open the can of worms. I think you said something you said before, which I can't remember the exact quote was right on. Like we haven't articulated privacy as a goal.
Yeah.
And in fact, privacy is a goal that's held in balance with other goals here. The whole idea of cottage housing is
Yeah.
that there's supposed to be three things going on: a private space for us, like for, my family, say if I in one of these units, and then a community space, and then it's like reaching out to the broader neighborhood, right? And so if we have free floating claims about privacy and it's not clear, like what's that referencing?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
so maybe we need somewhere up above something that actually articulates those three interconnected parts that we can point to here, right? And then we're saying, right, like, I don't know if it's up in the objective part. Like, is there a sentence before the main entries of some cottages that say, cottage housing developments? Sorry, the words aren't coming to me. It should say something like, are meant to be meaningfully integrated with the broader community to create a common space for the cottage housing development community and to maintain private space for the owners of the the residents of the units,
Mhm.
right? And then you could move that thing up. Like, so then it says the main entries of some cottages will be visible from the adjacent streets to provide a visual, right? So that like addresses one of those goals. And then this one moves up like and is rearticulate like you're saying, and it sort of points towards the other. It's something like that.
Yes,
Mhm.
Sense.
yes.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So that's going to be on the recording, right?
I hope so.
But it makes a lot of sense because if you read the objective now, it's all actually about connecting to the neighborhood.
Yes,
To
which is
John's
great.
point, it doesn't say anything about privacy.
Right. And we wouldn't want somebody to read this and think, oh, that we're supposed to enclose everything and make it a private space.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're keeping the cottage, this G, keeping it, are you suggesting keeping it here as G or moving it up?
Open it up.
Just moving it up. Mhm.
But I'm open to either, yeah.
I think, are you saying both? You need to reference it in the objective and then back it up.
Yeah.
In the standard.
Yeah, I think the
Yeah.
objective needs to articulate that we're trying to do all, those three things, health and balance. And then I don't have a strong feeling about whether it stays down in G or moves up there. I'm totally
Okay.
deferent on that.
So how about if we say leave G, use the sentence that you articulated that I did not write down. And then use G, cottage orientations, window locations, landscaping and get rid of the and there, staggered location of cottages or other similar techniques should be used to support privacy.
If you put staggered in front of cottage orientations, if you have staggered cottage orientations,
Good.
window
Ah.
locations, landscape and landscaping are examples of strategies that encourage or support privacy.
Well, we have to get rid of our examples of, because
Well, okay, then
Yeah.
just support, just
Yeah, yeah,
take
yeah.
that out and just say support privacy.
should be used to support privacy. Staggered cottage orientations, window locations,
And
landscaping
landscaping.
and other similar techniques. Should be used to support privacy.
There you go.
It took a village, but we got through. Do you have that, Kate? Okay.
So you'll come up with a magic sentence,
That's good.
Arnie, and
She'll come up with something even better than what we said.
under objective.
All right. So are we moving on, or did you have other things, Arnie, on that page?
Yeah, I did. D, no, I'm not sure that I dare. D, it kind of gets the same what we're talking about, but D, units and other buildings shall be oriented toward each other or a common area as far as reasonably practicable, so as to create a sense of community.
Mhm.
And I wanted, because we're doing this community within and reaching out to the community. So my simple suggestion was to add to that within the cottage housing development. So as to create a sense of community within the cottage housing development, just to sort of further
Yes.
put a point on what we're trying to accomplish with that community.
Great.
Yes,
Mhm.
good. Thank you.
Anything else on that page? Oh, boy. Moving on. Page 20.
Starting, at least for me, for 1B, roofed was highlighted, and I asked Kate why, and then she quite right pointed out that we are in a section that's already talking about covered main entry porches. Well, you can't have a cover without a roof, so maybe roof isn't necessary.
Yeah.
Oh,
Covered porches,
So maybe
yeah.
screened, but shall not be enclosed.
Mhm.
And I have something just above that to maintain the same format as E on page 19. I think we need to have the following building design requirements must be met
Oh, that
at
so at the end of
at the end of the
last sentence,
objective.
the following.
Yeah. The following maybe design requirements. I don't know if it needs to be building, but Maybe it is building. Just to be clear that what we're talking about.
So that same idea of you get to the end of that first paragraph and then the following building design requirements must be met, A, B, C, and D.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the diagram that's highlighted is simply, we need to reference the correct section.
Mhm.
Or figure out what our diagram numbers are, if we even have them. So that's for us to figure out.
So rather than say this for however many more there are, I see that the next section, cottage floor area, has the same problem, except that it's got some numbering issues. Do we need to have the following design?
Yeah.
Okay,
We're-
okay.
Paste from other.
Yep. So having the following design requirements must be met at the end of each objective that has design requirements should be added to the, at the end of each section 1, and then like in section G, 2 needs to actually be A.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just so that when we go through the, yeah, you got it. Okay.
Mm.
Thank you. Do you have anything else, Arnie, in F? Sorry, I moved us.
Not in F.
Okay. How about in G?
In G, just a minor item, because I like to read the ordinance and know without having to do any math what the requirements are. So in the cottage floor area 2B,
Mhm.
where we're talking about, well, in A, you say 900 square feet is the maximum for a 1-story, in a 2-story in B, or it could be 750 square feet in the upper level, no more than 50% of the floor area. So they're just in parentheses, i.e. a maximum of 1,125 square feet.
I have
So
that too.
Just because.
Yep. So, this section made me wonder, there was another section further on that made me wonder, do we want a minimum square footage for cottages?
I think we discussed that, and
No,
at that point it was a no, and that
Okay, I just wanted to, I couldn't remember if we had. I'm just thinking, what's the smallest dwelling that you can have?
we don't have them minimum.
So you could have,
Currently.
you could have a, I don't know, a 1-room, 100-foot, 10 by 10, is that?
I have to think about what Steve has told me about dwelling unit codes, so building code requirements. But as an example, I know we've talked at least briefly about 500 square foot tiny homes and whether or not they're in a permanent foundation or not. But as an example, Max built, I believe, 2 900 square foot buildings. Now that's not near as small as what you're getting to in your
Yeah.
example, but just to highlight that we do not have a minimum currently. If somebody can come in and meet the building code requirements, I can't remember, bedrooms are a minimum of 35 square feet or whatever it is, and you have to have heating, you have to have heating, hot water. I can't remember about kitchens and bathrooms. So as long as you can meet the building code requirements, build a structure, a residence. But I don't know, that's not completely answering your question of how small can somebody get. But in previous conversations, I don't think we wanted to put a lower floor on that.
So I'm just gonna I'm thinking about like that, the property on the corner of Walker and Houston. So if they could put a maximum, what's the maximum number they could put on there? 12? I mean, could they put 12?
Can't remember from our analysis.
Based on the square footage.
Yeah.
We have a lot. Yeah.
Of the lot, so I don't know how big that lot is.
We've said 1 cottage per 4,000 square feet for R1. So it's not gonna
So-
allow them to put more houses the way we have it written. Even
So
if
we
it's tiny.
couldn't, yeah, so they couldn't, there is a,
Right.
okay, yeah, thank you.
So the square footage is going to take care of, per unit is going to take care of how many, and not necessarily.
Not how
if he
necessarily
tries
how
to get
big, yeah.
whole bunch of many more small ones in, if that's the question.
Well, so yes, you can't cram a whole bunch of small ones on the same property. You could have a whole bunch of really small ones, but they'd still be on a property that was big enough to have 12
Right.
or whatever. Okay. I'm good. Thank you. Next.
You know what I didn't really pay attention to was on some of the other small houses that they, you know, whether it's in Shoreline or wherever. Did anybody actually put a minimum size? I didn't pay
Don't
attention to that.
recall one
Yeah,
immediately.
okay. Well, okay. If
Not
they
that I can
didn't, I don't
recall.
know that we have to, but that one.
Mhm.
Ross Chapin's is 635 square feet. You know,
Right.
It's a good question. I think in the context of Lexington, I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah.
Historically, it might be an issue in a more crowded space where someone could be building a whole bunch of small little units. But
But the minimum square footage is gonna still get around that. I mean, you might still have the very small houses, tiny houses even. As long as they're not on wheels, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As long as they're on a foundation.
It's a real
So you
house.
could have those, but you could still only have the same number
Mhm.
of houses.
I mean, as Arnie pointed out, we can already do that now. I mean, you can build,
Right.
don't have a minimum.
Right.
It's also a little bit hard for me to think of a developer that's going to have so many per square foot that's going to decide to do the smallest thing as opposed to the
Right.
biggest thing to get
Right.
more money
Right,
for
right.
the more square footage.
Right.
But it will be interesting to see if future planning, I think we're great where we're at, but if future planning commission wants to give a density credit to allow you to put some more smaller
wow.
units on it for like affordable housing.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think we're at a good place right now for
Now,
starting out.
yeah.
So are we moving on to H?
My only recommendation here is when we're talking about minimum yard requirements and we've got that listed out or written out, I'd also like to take that same information and put it in a table, not
That's good.
substitute the table for it, but just below where we're describing the setbacks, have an additional table. Because when people go flying through here looking for the setbacks, they can
Mhm.
find it much more easily if it's in a table. Right.
I think
If
that's
you
great.
Do it that way, you can decide if you want it or not. You might consider for the front yard that it has to be a minimum of 8 feet. I guess that's not true. That's only true if that's your private open space. Does it have to be in your front yard?
This was more for perimeter, if that's the question.
Okay.
Are you gonna put
it says exterior
just
lot
this in the
Oh, yeah,
table or
right, you're right.
are you gonna put just the building setbacks from the exterior lot lines? Or are you gonna put all of it in a, like in a,
Like a
all of
summary
the setbacks?
document. What I was proposing just here for the information that's in 14B to put a separate table, keep that information there, but just put a separate table that mimics it, but just in table format. We have for other things, if this is the question, done summary sheets for for short-term rentals and whatnot, and then we can sort of compress the information there as opposed to maybe somewhere else in this code having a table that deals with the density, deals with the lot size, deals with setbacks, if that's the question.
Yeah, I just think it would be helpful to have I mean, I'm fine. I like the idea of having a table here. I'm just thinking that it would also be helpful to have a table that shows not just the exterior, not just the,
Parking,
Yeah.
all that stuff
Yes,
sort of
all of it.
combined. Again, we've done that in other documents
Okay.
to summarize it, but I'm not sure that we do it here in this section of the code.
well, if you think that it would be helpful.
Okay. I actually hadn't thought that far along, so I appreciate the suggestion.
So we're on to I.
I've got nothing there.
Except for the J.
Yeah.
The J is,
Kate's
needs
better
to be
Kate-
something else.
Kate knows that.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
We pulled from so many places
Yep.
and we're,
Formatting,
Yeah.
formatting.
I'm gonna zip it about the formatting.
So so in H, we lay out the setbacks from the exterior lot lines. And then on I, all we're saying is you just have to be 10 feet away from another cottage. So no rear setback requirement other than
Mhm.
10 feet. I guess that makes sense. It's just 10 feet on all sides. Well,
Well, it's 20 feet on the rear property. Are you talking about around the,
but it's only 20 feet from the rear property if you're adjacent to, if you're on the edge of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Abutting the outside.
So this one's like within, so within it's 10 feet on all sides.
Yeah.
Cottage to cottage is what you're saying, right? Leslie?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. If you have another cottage next to you. I guess that's,
are we missing something?
well,
Is
that's
that
what I'm trying to figure out. If it says, if we are,
Hmm.
building within a cottage.
I think that's mighty small, but
'what's mighty small?
10 feet, but that was already discussed, so I won't revisit. that.
Hmm.
Less than my bedroom.
Yeah, and they are, based on Weatherburn, like from side to side, they're about 10 feet.
Really?
And then we don't require any front yard other than whatever your open space is, has to be a minimum of 8 feet. And we don't say. Yeah, the main entrance to the common. We're just seeing if we require that the private open space be on the front of the house.
Wouldn't that be the public right of way?
But it depends how they're oriented, right?
Yeah, right.
could be side loaded to a degree?
Yeah, so I guess that's our safety net. We're just saying all the cottages, they just have to be 10 feet apart. We don't set any other setback.
Mm.
Okay,
So generally, it was just the idea of around the perimeter,
Yeah.
depending on what you have and what's beside you to some degree, and then internally from one another.
okay. And you have, yeah, okay. I guess that's okay.
It's just a minimum, right? So am I right that if we kept it like that, I like that it keeps flexibility. Am I right, though, if they came in with the design and it was just they're all stacked 10 feet apart on each side and it doesn't sort of fit with the spirit of everything else that we're talking about? we
Mhm.
could-
Well, we said staggered.
Yeah, like we have all that, right? There's like I'm hesitant to try to over design
Mhm.
because there's so many possible configurations, right? Like, so thinking through the geometry of it, I'm afraid I wouldn't do a good job of it. Am I making any sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Simplicity of the 10.
And 10 feet, because of the way we've set it up so that if you have a second floor, it's got to be smaller
Yeah.
than the lower floor. 10 feet is gonna feel like a lot more than Weatherburn, where they're 2 floors or 2.5 floors, whatever they are. Where I think 10 feet feels pretty narrow, might feel narrow. So, Okay.
What is number 2 doing there under that? Under I, accessory
Yeah.
building shall comply with the building code.
Right.
It is stuck in there.
Is that just a catch-all or?
Well, in the first one, we're talking about the cottages themselves, and then the second one is about just the accessory buildings, so they could potentially be closer as long as they met the building code requirements. If I'm not mistaken, there's a 5-foot separation between buildings and accessory buildings. I think that's why we grabbed that building code requirement language there. Some of I'm not gonna be able to remember which ones, but the railroad cottages, they were 6 feet or so. But they also had sprinkler systems in each building.
Hmm.
And we thought, I think when we're going through that conversation, that was too close and we didn't really want to necessarily require sprinkler systems. So that's how we got to 10.
Yeah.
And then one of our other examples had the accessory buildings that were closer as well to each other, I think. And So I think, again, we grabbed the building code requirement language just to put whatever the building code requirement language is just for the accessory buildings, because we were already established the 10 feet for cottage to cottage separation. We're not really so sure how many of these accessory buildings, since we're not requiring them, how often that's going to occur anyway.
So are we good with section I then? Yeah, okay. Moving on to J, common open space. Do you have anything?
Nothing on until we get to page 22, C.
Does anybody else have anything? Okay. C, other amenities.
1, 2, 3, fourth line down, the parenthetical, which shall not include, and strike the kitchen facilities, which shall not include kitchen facilities. I
Okay.
think that these are unnecessary.
Yep.
And then further on, for stays of 14 days or less, or kitchen facilities to facilitate social function of the owners association.
Of the association.
I think you just flip or transpose owners
Okay.
association.
Okay,
And that's all I had in that section.
all right. Private open space.
Nothing from me.
Anybody else have anything in private open space? Okay, moving on to trees and vegetation. I don't know.
Green stuff.
Green stuff. So cottage housing developments shall be designed to incorporate existing trees. Maybe to the extent possible with, with an emphasis on native trees. I don't know.
Well, if we're putting that in the, yeah, and on the first page,
Yep.
then we definitely need it in that section.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then new trees shall be located to create amenities in the common open space, private open space, provide shade where appropriate to create separation between buildings when desired. And to screen and soften the perimeter of the parking areas and street facing sides of cottage housing developments. I would like to suggest that we include native species of trees and plants are recommended, are suggested, at least something that. Does that sound good to you all?
And I thought we did with that. Yeah. Okay, yes, I agree.
I'm sorry,
As a final sentence.
as a final sentence, yep. And do you have that well enough in the recording? Okay.
Oh, no Bradford pears.
No Bradford pears, please. Okay, the next item is stormwater low impact development techniques.
Could I perhaps go back to trees and
Oh, yeah,
vegetation?
please.
Since we're that first objective, cottage housing development shall, can we soften that perhaps to should be designed to incorporate existing trees to the extent possible
Yeah.
to emphasize native trees? I'm again worried that we really don't have much support for that.
Yep.
And the same thing with the next sentence, new trees shall be located. Maybe that should be located.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Are we ready to move on to stormwater then?
I just have
I have a question. Are gutters required in town?
not that I'm aware of, and have never heard of that requirement.
And is that something that we need to consider since these houses are sort of, potential for a lot of rainwater coming down off of these roofs? I don't know.
I've never heard of that. And what little I know about sort of low impact design techniques, I've never heard of that necessarily as one of them.
Okay.
As an example, in my Florida house, there were this different type of gutter system that I purchased where if you come down the sort of the fascia a little bit and out, instead of having a gutter there were a whole bunch of little louvers that would actually, as the water came off, it would disperse it out into the yard.
Huh.
So it would actually create a little bit of dispersion, so they would then soak into the surrounding area.
Pretty neat.
So that was sort of anti-gutter, I guess, but
Yeah.
it still worked to do
It's like a sprinkler system.
Keep it away from the.
at least to some minimal extent.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so that was just a question.
I just recommend again that that first sentence, cottage housing development should be designed to take advantage of.
Yeah.
And then, so the sentence that we were talking about earlier, the following design requirements are recommended. Is that,
Yeah, just keeping the formatting the same on all.
Yeah.
all these.
or the following techniques?
That's good.
And could we add rain gardens to that?
Hmm.
To the list in A? So directing roof drains and parking lot runoff to rain gardens, landscape beds, greener living roofs, and the use of rain barrels. Do we allow living roofs? Just making sure. Okay,
As
great,
far as I know, as long as the structure is structural enough to support that, yes.
super. All right, anything else in M? All right, moving on to N, off-street parking.
And the objective, my only recommendation is to get rid of objective through the alternative design process. So there's a however sentence in the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8th line. However,
Yep.
on a site-specific basis, design solutions other than clustering may be found to meet this objective. And then strike through the alternative design process, because again, we don't have the alternative design process.
And this whole formatting is all screwy.
Yeah.
And so so in yellow, we've got highlighted number of bedrooms per cottage. Is that because do we have a maximum number of bedrooms? Not a minimum, but a maximum.
We did not set a maximum. No, we talked about it and decided not to.
So do we know why this is highlighted?
I do not.
I think we had a debate about it,
Yeah.
but we didn't come to a conclusion. Number of bedrooms per cottage.
So is there a minimum, I'm just thinking about the maximum cottage area is 1,125 square feet. So how many bedrooms can you have in that size? Can you have 5 bedrooms they can just be tiny little bedrooms?
I think when I asked the building official, if I remember correctly, and don't hold me to this, I think there was a minimum bedroom of square footage only like 60 square feet or something. It was fairly small, a good bit smaller than I had expected there to be. So yes, you can think about a twin bed in a small room, you can get a lot of small bedrooms.
Okay. But the maximum number for any number of bedrooms is 2 parking spaces. So you can have 10 bedrooms if you can fit them.
Because don't we say in the beginning that this is intended for 1 and 2?
Correct, that's the
Mhm.
intent language. So I
So-
don't expect somebody to load up an 1,125 square foot cottage with
It does seem unlikely.
too many bedrooms.
What does our existing code say? I remember we went through this for the general's retreat. So was it tied to bedrooms in there, Ernie? I think it was, right?
Multifamily, we did change it from whatever it was. I think
Right.
it was 2 per unit. But multifamily dwellings now require 1.25 for each studio and 1 bedroom unit, 1.5 spaces for each 2 bedroom unit, and 2 for each 3 or more bedroom unit.
Right, so that's what we've got here.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I think the question is if we're intending this for, sorry, 1 to 2 people as opposed to 1 to 2, sorry, was that? How many, what is the 1 to 2 number that you just referenced, John?
1 to
2
2
people?
Yeah.
So then are we limiting it to, I mean, if it's only, if we're saying this, the intent is 1 to 2 people, but we allow 15 bedrooms or whatever.
I don't have a problem because they're going to use one as a study. It probably won't technically be a bedroom.
So my only question in this section, other than the yellow, is in the picture under 2B. There's a screened dumpster. All right, sorry, I've got more than one question. Our dumpster, all right, so that's a question for later, but are dumpsters required? And if so, is there screening required around them and where do they go?
Screening is required around dumpsters.
Okay,
Can't remember what we actually call them, but yes, they're required to be screened, but I don't think there's a requirement for the dumpster.
okay,
And the reason I think that is we had the 8-plex over on McLaughlin Street that was knocked off its foundation and sat there for years. And then somebody came in and fixed that entire place up, but they didn't want to pay for the dumpster. So they got carts instead. So I don't think we have a sanitation or solid waste requirement for the dumpster. And it's actually better to have
Okay.
the dumpster than it is to have individual carts that people don't pull back in.
right. Right, particularly if you've got a bunch of them lying up on the street. So that's something that we want to maybe talk about, but I'm not sure, I don't think this is the section of,
So
Under utilities?
and yeah, maybe under utilities. So, and then in section B2, I believe that, I think that it should read to the side of the cottage housing units accessed by a private driveway, not accessed by a private, I think. Yeah, the other ones are accessed. So I think that should be accessed.
Where are you, Shannon? Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm at the top of
Thank
page
you.
25.
Okay, good. Yep.
And then in section 3, right below that, it says parking on the side or non-primary street screened from the side street by either garage doors, landscaping, or fencing or fencing. So the drawing is inconsistent with the words because the drawing has the screening from the residences instead of from the street. So I'm just not quite sure which one we're intending. Do you understand what I mean?
yeah, but I'm not sure how you have, well, the access way, the drive aisle, obviously you can't screen. But I think, see what you mean by the parking spaces themselves should be screened from the side street. And that's not what's shown.
That's not what's shown. So it's just inconsistent. Whichever way it goes, it should be consistent with the drawing. And then we show in 2, right above that, we show screening, but it's not required. So are we requiring screening from the street, from the adjacent properties? And if so, we should say that we are.
Take care of the first part. Do you mind if we just squiggle in along the side street, some screening in this diagram so that people will know that it should be between the street and that first parking space? That's easy enough to accomplish, but that doesn't get to your second point of whether or not it's required.
Right. So the benefit of requiring it is that people driving by, it doesn't look like a big apartment complex with a big parking lot. Which I don't know what the parking, so if you had an apartment complex, what are there screening requirements?
You know what? And I just warn you, if you're gonna have screening on the road, that is a huge visibility issue.
Yeah.
Triangle.
Yeah, that's my concern too. I was just thinking of that, Leslie, because how many times you pull up to an intersection
Mm-hmm.
and someone isn't taking care of their hedge and it's a real, then you got a nose out there.
Right.
So it is.
Yep.
I do it every day leaving work.
So then,
Okay.
so then maybe and then the other question is, so this shows screening the parking from the housing. Is that something that I don't remember talking about that. Are we
Screening from the house.
screening the parking spaces from the housing or not?
Makes for more aesthetically pleasing for the cottages, I
Sure.
think. Yeah.
Sure, it does, but it's just a question of whether we're requiring it.
To partially answer that, so one of my suggestions in C was to provide our code section, so reference there, which would be section 420-14.7. And reading from 420-14.7, which is in our landscaping section, but in particular, it's parking lot landscaping. And we have it broken down into two sections. One's about parking lots adjacent to lot lines, which is what this would be. For parking lots immediately adjacent to lot lines, the following landscape regulations apply, and there's two parts. So the first one, where a parking lot abuts a property line not common with the right of way of a street, a landscaping strip of 2.5 feet in width shall be located between the parking lot and the abutting property line. Number two, a minimum of 1 tree for each 40 feet of contiguous property line shall be planted in the landscape strip. So that's where you're going to adjacent property lines. And then the next one is about parking lots adjacent to public streets, which actually is what we're doing here. Where a parking lot abuts a public street or right of way, a landscape strip of 5 feet in width, not including the sidewalk, shall be located between the parking lot or private driveway and the right of way line. A minimum of 1 tree for each 40 feet of property line common with the public right of way shall be planted in the landscaping strip. So in this case, it would be a 5 foot, but only 1 tree. So it's not going to, we don't have any, we have very limited landscaping requirements. So it's not like it has to be fully planted and create a hedge or
Right.
that would then be a sightline issue.
Okay, so in C, that would they'd have to have a 5-foot buffer. And sorry, C, I meant 3. And 2, it would be a 2.5 foot because it's along the,
Shared property line.
Shared
with
property
something
line.
Else, not a right of way, correct.
and then in 1, there wouldn't be any requirement because it's onto an alley.
Alley's a right of way. The
But
public alley.
they're parked, it's pulling off the alley.
Oh, straight off the alley. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm fine with all of that. I don't know how everybody else feels, but I wonder if we want to just mention somewhere before. Well, maybe it doesn't matter. But the drawings should be consistent with what's required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to struggle a little bit with changing the drawings. I'm just going to be honest.
You're gonna what?
Struggle with changing the drawings.
Wow.
We'll figure out a way. I'm not the drawer
I
or
see.
the
Okay.
You can
or
draw that.
paint or if we have to add landscape strips and whatnot, we'll do the best we can. But I'm just
This is
cautioning you
whiteout
that
is your friend.
it might be very
White out.
Whiteout,
Gardening.
seriously.
I think you can still find some somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure you can.
Yeah. So our note is we need to make sure that the drawings actually match code requirements.
Yes.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that the words also match the requirements. So parking on the side, screened from the side street by garage doors, landscaping, or fencing. And that's different from the ones, I don't know. I just think that all the language needs to be consistent with the ordinance,
Yep.
the parking ordinance.
And is this, I mean, did we come to a decision that this is in descending order, I'm looking at B, preferred locations for parking in descending order of preference. Was that something? I mean, I'm happy with it, but if we borrowed that from somewhere, just, are we understanding why we're using that?
I completely understand why
Mhm.
this would be my order of preference as well.
Right.
To get it as far away from an exit in the middle of a street. Or cars that potentially could back up into the street.
Yeah. Okay.
All right,
Right,
anything
thank you.
else in parking, Arnie? Or anybody else?
Just on 3A, when you format, making sure that subsection B matches up with whatever that ends up being.
Where?
On 3A,
Yeah, we're already on 3. Okay, I didn't know we were on 3 already. Yeah, me too.
I have B highlighted if that's the
Good,
reference
yeah.
question.
right, that's all it is just make sure it matches, yeah.
All right, next page, fire lane access and turnaround provisions. Are we good
this.
there?
Are we willing to push through
Yes, I'm
in the
willing.
time?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Yeah,
I've got nothing in O.
Nothing in O. How about in P?
That was highlighted. We borrowed some language, I think A and B, and if I remember correctly, I had a miscellaneous section last time with 3 items that we went through, and we added C in after reading through that. I think my recommendation would be to combine B and C in such a way. In B, we have heating and cooling equipment. I would recommend that become mechanical and utility equipment.
Yeah.
And then the rest of that sentence remains the same. And then in C, get rid of that entire first sentence. And then starting with the word preferred, just add that up into the bottom of B.
Mm-hmm.
Should I read that in?
Yeah.
Okay. B, mechanical and utility equipment for cottage housing developments shall be designed and appropriately screened to cause little or no visual and or noise impacts within the development and to adjacent properties. Preferred locations are abutting alleys, access drives within or under buildings, underground, or other locations away from the public right-of-way. Equipment shall not intrude into required open space or pedestrian pathways.
Great. Okay, so here's my question. This is where I was wondering if this is where dumpsters go. Dumpsters, garbage cans, whatever it is that we're calling them. And also, what about mailboxes? Are mailboxes, do they go on these houses or do they have a super box?
Yeah, doesn't the post office require a super box for new developments with multiple houses?
No, generally across the entire country, they're trying to do less foot traffic to the front door, but I'm not sure exactly what our post office would require. But generally speaking, they don't want to every single time go to your front door. And it's going to be a little bit more complicated depending on how many fences and access to something like this. So my guess is it's going to be a super box.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's a super box, so where does that go? And do we say this is where this is going?
Well, that's what it seems like. Maybe do we put it both in parking? Wouldn't they both be by the parking somewhere?
That seems like to me they would be adjacent because then people get out of their cars.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more opportunity for community building if they're
Right.
Maybe make it a 4 and a 5 under parking, whatever, however it ends up being formatted.
So, and does the mechanical and utility equipment also go? I mean, abutting alleys, access drives.
So if we require that mail be directly adjacent to the parking, now I know we're not requiring a community building, but we're allowing for the possibility of a community building. Will
It
we
could be either or.
Yeah, because we don't want to preclude it being there, especially with the idea that people might be
Mhm.
running into each other as they go get their mail as a way to foster interaction, right?
So a lot of times the post office, if you can't drive up to the community building,
Mm.
that you have to be,
Yeah.
they won't walk it up to your house
Mm.
with new construction.
Mm. Mm.
So
But then if the post office has a rule, we probably don't have to write their rule into what we're doing because they'll somehow make that happen, right?
I'm still struggling admittedly with where to put the dumpsters and mailboxes. If mailboxes are even mentioned, and P is talking about exterior lighting and heating and cooling equipment and noise. And do we need to create a separate section?
I put it with off-street parking.
Or with parking?
Would you ever put a dumpster, I guess make a separate pad away from your parking?
Because the equipment has to access it
Right.
to empty it, so it's almost always in the parking.
Right.
Can't think of
So-
one that's separate unless it's downtown in a strange location.
Yes, I just add it as a separate number 4
Yes.
parking.
So just put a number 4 in. So we're talking about the bottom of page 25
Mhm.
and come up with some sort of
Yes.
dumpsters.
Mailbox, or like, I don't know what you could, what would you call that? Like,
Make them each separate, or
say again?
just do one for post box, one for dumpsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll come up with something there.
Okay. So you all are gonna see if you can find that. Great. Anything else in P? Exterior lighting. All right,
Oh.
moving on to Q.
Can we put R in front of Q? Just because it seems like that should be the last thing we talk about is ownership and move the fences and walls.
Fences
Well,
got plugged in at the end anyway,
Yeah,
just as a
right.
miscellaneous thing.
All right, so fences is now Q.
Again, sorry.
Fences is gonna be renumbered. Sorry, it's on the last page.
Oh, yes,
That's
yes.
gonna get.
Yep.
That's gonna be reordered.
I've got nothing for fences and walls, if we want to do that first, since it's now the queue.
Does anybody,
I
does
don't
anybody
mind.
else have anything for fences and walls?
Mhm.
I just really appreciate that no razor wire is allowed.
Yeah, right.
Just saying. All right, so what do we have under ownership?
Oh, I have a couple of references that I need to clarify, and that is the right section of the state code. I checked that. The Title 55 is the Condominium Act for the state of Virginia, but obviously getting rid of Winchester and putting in our appropriate circuit court clerk. And then oh, and I was putting something in here that we already put somewhere else, so I have nothing else.
All right, good that.
Does the heading
So-
for parking get changed, and also does the
Oh.
heading for exterior lighting get changed at all? Those two headings.
So exterior lighting would be exterior lighting and mechanical and utility equipment.
Works for me.
That sounds good. Thank you for catching that. And same thing, we'll figure out what, N needs to change to.
So you're right, it's not just off-street parking, it's parking and like
Trash.
accessory
Next,
uses or not accessory uses.
May just do a slash dumpster slash post boxes or something of that nature. We'll
Okay,
figure something out.
That works.
May I ask a question on ownership? We lock in, decide only condominiums, or in Virginia, are there alternatives like co-ops? And I don't know the answer. I assume it'll be a condominium, but if,
what are co-ops allowed? you
but are
mean?
co-ops allowed? And given the nature of all the design standards we have in here, we might. Yeah. So.
Can you look into
I'll try to
that?
do a quick dive into co-ops.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that, and I don't really know physically what the difference is.
There's not much difference, except
Sure.
I think in definitions of common ownership.
So-
But the important thing is it an option and is it used? And so
Is that what common ground is, a co-op?
I should know the answer to this, but it was so many years ago that I worked for the Cooperative Housing Foundation. I can't.
Okay. All right.
Just, is it an option?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
And that's the question.
Okay. Are there any other?
Well, getting back to the bedrooms now, we did say, now I can't find where the language is that says 1 or 2 people.
Can't either.
Is that not in the intent?
Yeah.
We had that.
Right. I thought we had it, but I don't, yeah.
See it. I
And
looked-
so now I'm wondering, do we put it in the bylaws, ownership and residential use of cottages, or somewhere saying in the HOA ordinance, I don't care how many bedrooms they have, but you're only allowed to have 1 or 2 residents in there.
But that would mean you couldn't have families, right?
Right.
And that is our intention.
Well, that was the original intention of the cottage housing, and that was what was from other,
Right.
And-
You could have a single parent with a single child.
We want it to be set up so that somebody, it couldn't be a single parent with 2
Two children.
kids or.
I think there was quite a debate at city council on this,
Yeah.
wasn't there?
There was.
Over accessory dwelling.
on accessory dwellings that
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Right.
And how did that come out? How did you?
It
all-
was 2.
We kept it as, 2 that planning commission brought forward.
Right.
And that was a little different because you're all on one residential lot.
Mhm.
We kind of went with the 1 or 2 on this. Just because that's how the other places were designing them.
So would 2 to 3? Like for that single parent who has, or the 2 parents who have a single child?
Yeah, I'd
A starter house. If we're talking about a starter house, then. But we can't, but
I-
there's no way to like say, oh, you had that second child, you're out. I mean, right?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm having deja vu all over again. That's exactly what we were talking about when we got
Yes,
to.
that was
accessory
that was
dwelling.
ADUs, right? Yeah.
And yeah, right. So they either limit the number of bedrooms.
Right.
Mhm.
Or we require them to put it in their HOA that they keep it small, or do we even care? But
Well,
if we don't
the-
care, then the
the
parking
neighbors-
and everything is always kind of.
Yeah, I think the neighbors might care when you're talking about. Right, because we talked about if you had 2 parents or if you had two kids, 2 teenagers, and then you've got whatever the parents, you've got 3 drivers. Where'd all the cars go? And you've got, multiple houses of multiple drivers.
Hmm.
So,
I could have
What-
sworn we had 1 or 2 intended for 1 or 2, and I'm not sure why I can't find
Talk
it.
about it. I know we talked about it.
Is some language is much looser in the off-street parking of these reduced standards are based on cottages being smaller than average detached single and average containing fewer occupants, but that's all I can find it. Even though
right.
I would have put a small amount of money that we had for 1 or 2 occupants.
I literally had that wording somewhere originally,
Oh,
So do we put it in purpose and intent? It sounds like we all sort of thought that there was.
Yeah.
I didn't, but
Yeah.
I did. I don't, you all seem to remember it, so it must have happened, but I don't remember that. And I'm not,
I remember talking about it because I said,
Yes.
I'm glad that we have it in there because we got into this debate with accessory
Oh.
dwellings. So it's nice to have it spelled out clearly.
yeah. I wonder if it was the meeting in October where I was not here.
Could have been.
It's the 1 to 2 that I'm finding quite restrictive.
I find that restrictive as well.
Right. So what if we said, 3 or fewer? Does that address your?
And then, well, possibly, yeah. But then the question is, who's enforcing that? Is it a,
Well, I think it's the intent, right?
intent.
Our intent is for these to be houses designed for 1 to 3 people.
Well, the only way you can enforce it, I would say, is through the HOA.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Les.
And it's kind of funny because Weatherburn originally was designed to be 55 plus, and it was written in there their covenants that you had to be over that. And so I know when St. Patrick's bought a house in there, we were like, we didn't care. We didn't have kids, but it was like, you're not enforcing this. There's kids. And they were like, and the builder was like, oh yeah, we're going to take that out. We're not. It's just interesting that it developed over time.
Right.
That families really did want those smaller houses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without big yards.
Right.
So
So then we're back to the, what
Yeah.
do we do? Do
because
we,
I'm
are we
less opposed to having families here than I would be in accessory dwelling.
less opposed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the idea of it being an opportunity for a starter home. I
Yeah.
think that's a beautiful opportunity.
So then we leave it out,
So should we limit the number of bedrooms?
or should we, right, to 3?
Or is it just a parking issue? Is it really about the house itself or in the space that they confine themselves in? Or is it really about how much parking is needed or those teenage drivers or adult drivers?
Right. So I think the parking is going to be the biggest
Right.
issue because it's gonna be spillover parking.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's gonna impact the neighborhood. People are gonna be unhappy if there is spillover parking,
Yeah,
a
that's-
lot of it.
Are the same standards we use for multifamily
Right.
though.
That's right.
How about we research where the 1 to 2 went because we're bringing this back to you anyway. Because I think there's so many changes that you're probably going to want to see it again. We have some other research on co-ops and a few
Right.
other minor things to handle. And we'll go and look where we maybe lost the 1 or 2 and figure that out. And then if not, then put in the intent section, something about intended for 3 or fewer occupants or something general in nature, if that's okay.
Yep. And do we want to limit the bedrooms to 3?
Well, I think you have to, if we really are gonna say 3.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
But we put the 3 occupants in there and then you all figure out bedrooms.
So how about you put 3 bedrooms and highlight it? It'll be maybe the last, it'll be the last highlight.
Yeah, and why do we care? The reason we care is because we're allowing this higher density. Is that
Yeah.
why we care?
I think that's why we
it's the
care.
Parking too, right?
And-
Yeah.
Because the number of the parking's tied to the number of bedrooms,
Right.
tied to the number of people.
Yes.
Right.
So, and also you know, if you've got a lot of bedrooms or a lot of people, they could be students.
Yeah. then you-
Realistically.
And right, because we didn't even address.
then they're all
unrelated and
drivers.
all that, yeah. Right.
To add to that, we also in R1 and R2 at a minimum have a maximum of 3 unrelated people that constitute a household, whatever unit. So that's already in the
Yeah.
code somewhere
Yeah.
else, just to throw that out there.
So that puts a cap on that situation.
Unrelated.
Or is that just in R1?
It's in
Is that what you
R1,
said?
R2. It's, I think we go up to 4 in some of the commercial zoning districts. So I'm reasonably sure without looking it up that in R1 and R2 at a minimum, maybe in RLC and RM, I can't remember. But we're only talking about RM, R1 and R2. I think now mostly it's a maximum of 3 unrelated people can
Okay.
constitute a household living unit or however it's actually stated.
Okay.
So this just occurred to me. Do we have somewhere in here where it is, or is that a condominium issue again? Could somebody buy a unit and then rent it out? Is that a condominium HOA?
It is
Issue.
the thing that we said is it cannot be rented out short term.
I know, but
But long term, I don't think we had anything in here, if I remember correctly. So
Right.
that would be an HOA question
Right.
on how they want to develop their covenants and restrictions.
And that's where co-ops tend to be a little more restrictive than condominiums in that regard. I do think that, I think to go back to Leslie's point, whatever number we agree on and whether we're saying is intended or encouraged, it goes back to the enforcement issue. And I think it does sit here under the HOA. Because that's not something that the city is going to go knocking on the door and say, how many of you are here?
Right. So are you suggesting that we put that it has to be in the HOA bylaws that there are 3 or fewer people
Yeah,
living
something
there?
to that, whatever number we agree or whatever language we agree, I think that's where it has to be. Doesn't that make sense? Yeah, you don't,
If we
I mean,
think
I was
they're,
on the board of our 52 unit condominium and yeah, enforcement was really difficult. Even when it's in your, when you have problematic, I mean, you could have someone that's just going to be a real decide, well, I'm gonna, I don't care what it says, I'm gonna have a bigger, I'm gonna let this out to a number of people. Anyway, I think it's something to think about.
Mhm.
But going back to what are the larger objectives? I think the starter home one, or, these are entry points for people wanting to get on the property ladder, or for people at my stage in life who are saying, I want to get off the larger house and
Yep.
into a smaller property.
Mhm.
So that's what we're aiming for.
right.
Or younger people that just want a smaller footprint.
Yeah.
Yeah,
perhaps.
that's what I
Right.
mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't mean to be repetitive, but one to two, given those objectives, seems
Yeah.
a little restrictive
I think
to
so.
me. Yeah.
On the front for enforcement, on the public side, it is much easier to enforce number of bedrooms
Yeah.
on
Than it is
floor
people,
plans
yeah.
than it is occupants.
Yeah.
Mind you, somebody can put in office and then it ends up being a bedroom and so be
Sure.
it. But just if we're going to enforce it on our side, I'd much prefer it be maximum number of bedrooms as
Mhm.
opposed to occupants, because occupancy is incredibly difficult to determine.
Mhm.
So, but you're gonna put the 3 bedrooms and highlight it so that we can,
We're going to put
Just talk
something in
about
your
that
intent
again.
section. Yes.
Yeah.
so John, are you thinking about language that would be along these lines in section, the new R, ownership and residential uses? HOA rules must enforce 3 or fewer people per cottage. Or HOA rules must require or allow only.
That would complement the bedroom. I mean,
Yeah.
so
But wouldn't that require us to have agreed that we're going to set 3 as a number? Like,
Yeah.
because we
Yes.
do have available the alternative strategy of just stipulating a number of bedrooms and
Right.
not
get away from the
Right.
number.
number of people
people.
entirely. Yeah.
We have 3 bedrooms. And then we also have the other code portion that I just mentioned, which is a maximum of 3 unrelated. Then the only thing
Yeah.
that would get by is a family with
Of-
more than 3. And is that a problem?
So you could have a family of, if you had 3 bedrooms, you could have a family of a set of parents and 4 kids.
Yeah.
And if they were all teenagers, you could have 6 drivers.
Yeah. I could imagine that happening. But I worry about, so I could imagine us trying to make restrictive rules to prevent the rare case of that, but actually in the process shutting down a lot of other arrangements such that the net effect of the rule would be like we'd be trying to preclude the worst case scenario, but actually ruling out some better case scenarios. Am I making any sense at all? So I feel
Yes,
like we've been here for a couple hours, so.
Maybe,
Right, yeah.
maybe it's up to the HOA or the
Yeah.
developer to be working this out.
I think that is very true.
Yeah.
It
So-
depends who their clientele is and where it is
The
and
number of bedrooms. Yeah.
So then 3 bedrooms is what we're going for.
I think so. I
Mhm.
think you want
So
more.
maybe we don't need the yellow highlighting on the 3 bedrooms.
Yeah.
It'll be new, so we'll still highlight it.
Okay.
Okay,
So we'd be saying a maximum of
Or
3
new old.
bedrooms.
maximum of 3 bedrooms.
And I don't know if something got cut out, but now I'm not seeing where we don't allow short-term rental. We didn't
No,
put,
it is.
Oh, it's in there.
it is?
Yeah, it's in
Okay.
there.
So,
I hope
I
so.
think it's on the ownership part,
Oh, maybe that's where okay.
Transient auction.
in Q.
Here it is.
Okay.
But wasn't it
Uh,
somewhere else
can-
as well?
Can we turn that as less than 30-day rental?
Instead of transient.
What
It
is,
says transient now, I think.
Yeah.
that's what okay.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you.
I think in the building code, it makes sense. Transient rentals is that, but you're
Okay.
right. The state code for short-term rentals is less than 30 days. So we'll do short-term rentals. I think it means the same thing ultimately, but I'm happy to do short-term rentals as opposed to transient, just so it matches the rest of the zoning ordinance language.
Right, right.
All right, isn't the anything else? Okay, so
Yeah.
now now I will open the floor to public comment on this issue. Would either of our guests, our one guest, would you like to come up and comment? Okay, I'm going to close public comment and open other business. Do we have a zoning and planning report?
Just one quick item, the ARB, Architectural Review Board, did approve the new design for the Courthouse Square Park. That was a Main Street Lexington Design Committee project. And the really first initial public review of that was through the ARB. And I believe they're going to be on council's agenda for next week to also give a presentation to council.
Right.
And you may have read that nice article in this week's paper.
Yep.
About that project. That's all I have.
All right, city council report.
The only other thing is just the renovation of City Hall. We're still on track to open bids in January, and we found alternate accommodations. Arnie, I hope you'll be able to bicycle to your new office.
I've already asked Tom to lower Walker Street, so he's working on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Good luck.
So we'll keep you posted, and maybe starting in February, we'll have some of the staff moving,
Maybe
hopefully.
electric bike. ride.
Fantastic.
It's Christmas.
There we go. All right, well,
There was one other item that I just wanted to have noted into the future agenda, hopefully in January, and that's for discussion or additional information regarding the institutional occupancy in downtown. So that's going to be on one of our future agendas, hopefully.
great. So the institutional creep issue, we'll discuss at some point and perhaps informed by council
Correct.
discussions.
Maybe one of the meetings in January.
Right.
We won't keep it at the first one because.
Yeah,
it's been
it won't.
absent.
Yes, I will be absent the first meeting in January, so it'll have to be the second one.
Just to put a little bit more
Sooner.
color on that, council is going to pick that up again. They've had one work session. They addressed some of the issues, but they want to talk about it again. So I expect more direction from council in the near future.
Right.
That doesn't preclude you from having sort of a general conversation about that.
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
that would be great.
And
All right.
based on some discussions about that, there might be another way to be looking at it is to change the question and say, what is a healthy relationship between the universities and the downtown? So we've been couching it as a problem.
Mhm.
How do we flip it and say, what is a healthy relationship? So that's one thing.
Is that something that feels like it would come from council?
It comes from council.
Okay.
yeah.
Just that approach would be great to hear from council. And Arnie, you said something to me about you were gonna give us some sort of an end of the year but in January.
I forgot with our schedule, we're not going to have another meeting this month. We normally provide you with the annual report that we have to provide to council every year, or the chair gets to provide that to council. That normally happens the second meeting in January. We should have probably had for you this evening that report. It's a fairly straightforward report, lists all of the conditional use permits and other items that you've approved, and just says a couple of nice things. And you're certainly, we will have that for you at the next meeting, which is the first meeting in January, for your quick review. We'll make any changes that's required and then get it to council for the very next week.
Right. And then are you going to look through the comprehensive plan and just sort of say what we have addressed? And didn't you, I think
we
you did
did
that
do
last
that.
time.
For the land use chapter,
Chapter,
only,
yeah.
if I remember
Only.
correctly. So yes, we can make sure that we do that as well.
Okay. All right.
Last time we went through the strategies that were there and said which ones were accomplished or were being worked on and which ones hadn't, just sort of a keeping track of what the strategies had been accomplished in the land use chapter.
Right. All right, fantastic. And I will make note that tonight is the last night that we will have John Driscoll with us.
Oh,
How long have you been
Sad.
on planning commission?
7.5 years
Wow.
this year.
You have
Same
done,
with Leslie.
you have done,
Leslie's been doing double duty for the same amount of time.
which,
So you'll still be involved in planning just from the
Different
fi-
side, yeah.
the final approval side.
right,
and-
right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
thank you so
congrats.
much for all of your efforts. You have done great things while you've been on council. I mean, on
It's
on
been
planning
It's
commission.
been I've enjoyed it and it's a great place. I think tonight is that, if you think about the debate we had tonight, this is what someone said to me a long time ago, that on planning commission, you can have robust debates that you don't normally get on council. Because on council, there's so much other stuff to be dealing with and you don't quite go as deep. And so here you have a chance and look at what we did tonight. I mean, this was, that's what happens on planning commission. So by the time it gets to council, it's really been worked through
Fine.
and pushed out. So, so then council's getting a high quality document that then and the other issue is on controversial ones. I've noticed that planning commission is the space to have that initial debate and the issues bubble up and then you can go. So it's been fun to do. I know I've been an irritant sometimes, but I hope not always.
No, not at all.
So-
And we will miss you.
Yeah.
So,
that's
but
for sure.
we're lucky to have you joining our city council. So thank you. And with that, we have reached the end of our agenda. So I'm waiting for, I think,
Move to adjourn.
I second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Everybody have a
that's
very
2024.
happy set of holidays coming ahead
Yes.
and thank you.
Yeah.